What's up, fight fans? This is Danny Howard from FightUp.com, and thank you for joining into this week's episode of the Pillar to Post video podcast. I got a lot for you this week, so without further ado, let's go on ahead and get right to it. Just in case any of you guys have forgotten, Manny Pacquiao is indeed going to be fighting next weekend against Timothy Bradley, and probably one of the weakest promoted pay-per-views that I've ever seen Pacquiao promoted in since before he hit it big, fighting Oscar De La Hoya. You know, I really don't know what to say about that. I mean, Top Rank has gone out of their way to not promote this fight. As a matter of fact, you could even go out and say that Manny Pacquiao's controversial did he or didn't he say about his opinion on homosexual marriage last couple of weeks has probably gotten more attention than the actual fight. And I don't know what that's going to translate to for the pay-per-view buy rates, but I don't anticipate it's going to be too hot. Now, on the other hand, Timothy Bradley is a little more well-known than Joshua Clottey is. He's been on both Showtime and HBO, so people have gotten a good look at him. 24/7, if you guys have been watching, has actually been pretty decent up to this point, and a lot of that is really because of Timothy Bradley. But I don't really see how this pay-per-view does as well as Pacquiao's previous pay-per-views. I'm thinking it'll do at least, and at the absolute minimum, the same as the Hatton pay-per-view, which was somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000 buys. But I don't really see it doing more than the fight with Juan Manuel Marquez. I definitely don't see it doing the same amount as the Marquez fight. I mean, maybe 1.1 million at best. But at the end of the day, really, really hard to say how this fight will do in the box office. It's going to be a decent card. You have Jorge Arce on the card. You have Mike Jones on the card against Randall Bailey. You have Guillermo Rigondeaux on the card. So I think that it's going to be a good event. But as far as Manny Pacquiao trying to keep up with Floyd Mayweather in terms of pay-per-view buyer rates, a poor showing against Bradley, which is almost all but guaranteed thanks to the lack of promotion, is going to make that fight that much more difficult to make, and even solidify the notion that there's no way that Manny Pacquiao gets 50-50. But at the same time, to be fair, I actually consider this fight, the fight with Bradley, to be probably similar to Floyd's fight with Ortiz. Ortiz wasn't a very well-known fighter at the time, despite his his appearances on HBO. So Ortiz Mayweather did about 1.2 million, 1.25 million, something like that. It'll be interesting to see how Pacquiao can promote his own pay-per-view, because really the basis of this pay-per-view is going to be just the fact that you get to see Manny Pacquiao fight. So at the end of the day, I'm saying about 800,000 buys at minimum, but not more than 1.2. This weekend, we'll have a quadruple header on Showtime that has multiple promoters, several different personalities on the card, and a pretty stacked card from top to bottom. The one thing that binds them all together is that at least 4 of the fighters on the card are managed by Al Haymon. That in of itself is pretty phenomenal, that Haymon can have multiple promoters work under each other to have such a pretty big event go on, and a fight that really shouldn't be a quadruple header is a quadruple header. So, that really shows you how powerful Al Haymon is and why he's the most sought after manager in the business right now. Now, on the card, leading off the card, will be Leo Santa Cruz against some guy whose name I can't even pronounce, and they'll be fighting for the IBF Bantamweight title. I haven't seen too much of Santa Cruz. I'm hoping to get a good look at him this weekend. Should be an interesting fight, just to see how quickly Santa Cruz goes through this ready-to-order fighter, as most Haymon fighters who go for their first belt usually are. So I'm picking Santa Cruz to win by early stoppage. The next fight's actually probably the most interesting fight on the card, in my opinion, will be Austin Trout versus Delvin Rodriguez. That's going to pit 2 very, very good junior middleweights against each other. Austin Trout's been one of those guys who's been hunting for an opportunity. He's not a very exciting fighter, but he is very slick. He is very skilled, and he's undefeated. Delvin Rodriguez, we've seen against Paul Wolak. He just dismantled Paul Wolak in their rematch of their fantastic draw sending Warlock into retirement. So this fight will pit the speed and finesse and the overall skill set of Trout versus the grit and the power of Rodriguez. I think that it's going to be a competitive fight, but I do think at around the 7th or 8th round, it'll be apparent that Austin is on his way to a very clear decision in outboxing Rodriguez. As far as my thoughts on Austin Trout, I like him. I think that he has good skill, but he also is fighting he is fighting the best opponent of his entire career at this point. So I'm not going to go out and say that this guy should be fighting Miguel Cotto or even Canelo Alvarez. I mean, he's more on the level of a Carlos Molina type fighter to me. I mean, he's dangerous, he's very skilled, he's very tough, but unlike Molina, he's also untested. But I do believe he should pass this weekend's test with flying colors with a pretty clear-cut unanimous decision over Delvin Rodriguez. Now, the co-main event between Peter Quillin and former junior middleweight champion Winky Wright actually is very concerning to me. Now, this fight actually has some trivia behind it. The trivia being that, this fight was supposed to be on the undercard of Mayweather-Cotto earlier in May. Problem was that despite the fact the contracts were signed, everything was good to go, the fight was ultimately pulled off the card because the Nevada State Athletic Commission did not want to license Winky Wright for the fight. The reason, more than likely, is due to the fact that Winky Wright, the last time we saw him in the ring 3 years ago, he was pummeled by Paul Williams and has had surgery on his hands, shoulders, and I believe his knee, if I'm not mistaken. And you have to go back even further, 2.5 more years, to find when Winky won his last fight, and that was against Ike Corte. When we last saw Winky in the ring, he really didn't look like he had a lot left. He could still keep his hands up, but he just couldn't throw any punches. He's going to be fighting against a guy in Peter Quillin who, has not been tested like Paul Williams has. So he should put on a little bit of a better showing. But ultimately, I just don't like this fight. I mean, he's 40 years old, doesn't throw a lot of punches anyway, and he's coming off a couple surgeries and a long amount of inactivity. It's going to be a boring fight, it's going to be an ugly fight, and really, I don't see what Peter Quillin gets from this, aside from, of course, adding Wright's name to the resume. If Winky makes him look bad or makes the fight look ugly, I don't know how that affects Peter's stock, to be honest. So, I'm picking Peter Quillin to win by a very, very lopsided decision. I don't think he's going to stop Winky, but at the same time, I do think he's going to beat him rather handily. Now, in the main event, it will pit Antonio Tarver, former light heavyweight champion, against the undefeated Latif Coyote. Now, a lot of people have brought this fight up to my attention, and they are wondering, how is Tarver going to do against the hard-punching, high-energy youth of Coyote? And I can tell you this much. When you're Tarver's age, and the same thing goes for Bernard Hopkins, you pick your fights for a reason. And I'm sure that Antonio Tarver picked this fight with Latif Coyote because, of course, he's been ringside for Coyote's fights. He's seen Coyote looking very unimpressive, and there's something that Tarver sees that he believes he can exploit. And I agree with him. Coyote may be young, he may be strong, but he doesn't punch in combinations, he has poor footwork, and he's been pretty much, he should have lost his fight, I believe, against Nick Iannuzzi, where he looked very unimpressive. And I'm sure when Tarver saw that fight, I'm sure the lights just turned on, and he goes, I'm going to fight this guy, and I'm going to beat him too. Now, is it possible that Coyote just may be wild enough and aggressive enough to beat old man Tarver? Yes, absolutely. But the thing is that, Coyote didn't pick Tarver. Tarver picked him. And I think that just that reason alone is enough to suggest that Tarver probably will win this fight. He probably will win the fight going backwards, pot-shotting the hell out of him. Does this mean that Tarver is going to be for real? I mean, can he beat guys like Marco Huck or Christoph Wawrczyk or anybody at cruiserweight? I don't know. I mean, wins against Danny Green and a presumed win against Latif Coyote makes it still questionable to see how he'll do. But if Tarver does beat Coyote, I believe he does deserve a good opportunity, be it against, Marco Huck or against Lebedev. But him fighting the Klitschko's, I think, is still borderline crazy. But hey, I'm not Antonio Tarver, and I don't manage him either, so I wish him the best of luck. So there you have it for this weekend's picks. I'm going with Leo Santa Cruz before the 5th, and I'm going to pick Trout, Quillen, and Tarver, all by lopsided unanimous decisions. Alright guys, so that's going to about do it for me this week. So please leave your comments below, and if you guys want to get in touch with me, please add me as a friend on Facebook. You could also add me on Twitter at dbhoward126. You can also email me at dhoward@fighthype.com, and please be sure to always dial it in to fighthype.com for your latest boxing and MMA news. So I'll see you guys at the fights this weekend, and then I'll catch you guys next week. Have a good one.